It was a Thursday night, nothing special. Dinner was half-eaten, the news was on, and our daughter Ella was finishing her homework at the table. Daniel came home late again. He smelled like the expensive cologne he only wore when he wanted to impress someone. He didn't notice me at first. He never did anymore. I asked if he'd eaten. He said he already had. That answer used to bother me, but lately it just confirmed what I already knew: he wasn't living here anymore. Not really. While clearing the dishes, I saw his phone light up on the counter. I wasn't snooping, it just happened. The message was short, harmless if you didn't know better. Can't wait for our weekend. Just you and me. Her name was Madison, the young PR woman from his firm. I stared at the text for maybe 5 seconds, just long enough for the world to shift from, "I think something's wrong," to, "Now I know." When Daniel noticed me holding his phone, his face went red, not from guilt, but anger. "Give me that," he snapped. I handed it over quietly, but he was already shouting, "You're invading my privacy." I said, "Your privacy? You mean the one you share with your girlfriend?" That's when he lost it. He slammed his hand on the counter so hard Ella flinched. "Get out, Grace. Just get out. Let me live my own life." It's funny how a sentence can hit harder than any slap. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I just stood there, and in that moment, I saw what was left of the man I married, and it wasn't much. Ella ran to her room, crying. I picked up my purse and coat, still shaking. He didn't follow. "No, I didn't mean it. No, let's talk." Just silence, and the sound of him opening a beer. I packed a small bag for Ella, went to her room and told her, "We're going to stay at Aunt Hannah's for a while." She nodded through her tears. I didn't explain more. Kids don't need adult lies dressed as comfort. When I walked out the front door, the night air hit my face cool, sharp, final. I realized something strange. The fear I thought I'd feel wasn't there. Only a deep, tired calm. The kind you get when a storm finally passes and the wreckage is all that's left. I drove to my best friend Hannah's house. She's a divorce attorney, which felt ironic at the time. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "So, he finally did it, huh?" and poured me a glass of wine big enough to drown in. We sat in her kitchen until midnight. I told her about the text, the yelling, the way he said it like I was the problem. She just shook her head. "Men like him don't want freedom," she said. "They want a do-over without the consequences." That line stuck with me. Because she was right. He didn't want to start fresh, he wanted to hit reset without facing what he broke. When I went to bed that night, on Hannah's pull-out couch, I thought about the last thing he said. "Let me live my own life." As if I'd ever stopped him. As if keeping our family together was somehow a trap. People talk about the moment you realize your marriage is over. They say it's like falling through ice, sudden, cold, silent. For me, it was more like a light switch. One click, and the room went dark. The next morning, Ella asked, "Mom, are we going home today?" I told her gently, "Not for a while, sweetie." She just nodded and went back to her cereal. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. While I drove her to school, I saw Daniel's car at the coffee shop near his office. Madison was with him. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm. He looked so at ease, so free, like the man who once told me he felt trapped by routine. I guess freedom looked like a younger woman, and a midlife crisis in a tailored suit. I didn't cry that morning. Instead, I laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that tastes bitter but necessary. Because if that's the life he wanted, he could have it. And I'd find something better. Peace. That night, I sat alone in Hannah's guest room, scrolling through old photos of us. The vacations, birthdays, even the boring Sundays. Every picture felt like a story I didn't remember living. That's when I decided I wasn't going to be the woman who begged to be kept. If he wanted me gone, I'd make sure he'd never forget what that decision cost him. Before I continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone tell you to get out of their life, only to realize they were the ones losing everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if stories about cheating, revenge, and emotional justice speak to you, make sure to subscribe. You'll want to hear how this ends. The night he told me to leave wasn't the end of my marriage. It was just the moment I stopped believing in his version of love. The first thing I noticed that morning wasn't the sun or the smell of coffee, it was the quiet. The kind that hums too loud because you're not used to it. Hannah had already left for court, and Ella was getting dressed for school. The sound of her tiny footsteps in the hallway was enough to keep me moving. I made her lunch like any other day, PB&J, apple slices, a note that said, "You are loved." I'd written that same note for years, but that morning, it felt heavier, like I was trying to convince both of us it was still true. After I dropped her off, I parked the car by the river. I sat there for a long time, staring at the water, wondering how someone could wake up one day and decide they're done loving you. I wasn't angry yet. I was just hollow. Anger would have been easier. By noon, my phone had 23 missed calls from my mother, my sister, and even Daniel. I didn't answer any of them. My mom's voicemail sounded panicked. "Grace, please call me. Daniel said you overreacted. You know how dramatic you can be." There it was. Overreacted. The word every woman knows too well. A man cheats, lies, screams, and somehow, you're the one being too emotional. I didn't call her back. Instead, I opened my email, because silence can only last so long before you try to fill it with something familiar. That's when I saw it, an email from Ella's school, the tuition reminder. Daniel always paid it automatically, but the message said payment failed. I checked our joint account. My name was gone from the online access. My stomach dropped. Not because of the money I had savings, but because it was clear. He wasn't just cutting me out emotionally. He was cutting me out completely. Hannah called right then, as if she could sense it. "He froze your access, didn't he?" "How did you?" "Because it's the first move men like him make. They want control. They think if they have the money, they have the power." I took a deep breath. He has the house, the accounts, the cars under his name. Hannah didn't sound surprised. "Grace, you need to start documenting everything, every transaction, every email, and don't say a word to him yet." I wrote down everything she said in a little blue notebook I found in Ella's backpack. Document everything. I underlined it twice. That night, Ella wanted to FaceTime her dad. I let her. I stood in the doorway, listening quietly, as Daniel acted like nothing had happened. He smiled, said he missed her, told her he'd take her to the zoo soon. Then he said, "Tell Mommy I hope she's cooling off." Cooling off. Like I was a pot left on the stove too long. I closed the door before Ella could hand me the phone. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and scrolled through our old photos again. It wasn't nostalgia, it was research. I wanted to understand where I'd stopped seeing him clearly. When the man who once kissed me on street corners turned into someone who shouted like I was furniture in his way. Around midnight, I heard a buzz. A text from Daniel. "I'm sorry for yelling. You pushed me. You always do. Let's not make this ugly." His marinade. It took me a minute to realize what he was doing. Rewriting the story. Making himself the reasonable one. I didn't reply. Silence can be louder than rage when you use it right. 2 days later, I ran into one of his coworkers at the grocery store, Cynthia, the HR manager. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd just walked into a funeral. "Grace," she said softly, "I didn't know you and Daniel were taking space." Taking space. That's corporate talk for, he's already telling people he's single. Ho? I smiled politely. "Oh, we're taking all the space he asked for." She didn't know what to say, so she pretended to care about the avocados and walked away. By the end of the week, word had spread. In small towns like Savannah, gossip travels faster than truth. People love a scandal, especially when it's wrapped in other people's heartbreak. I could feel their eyes when I picked up Ella from school. Some were sympathetic, most were curious. One mom whispered to another, "She always seemed so perfect." They always say that when someone's life cracks open. I learned to keep my head high, even when it felt like my spine was splintering. You can't fight whispers, but you can starve them of satisfaction. That Friday, Hannah took me out for dinner. She said, "You know what your biggest weapon is right now? Law school?" I joked. She smiled. "No, dignity. You stay calm while he spirals. It drives men like him insane." Eh? That was the night I decided silence would be my strategy. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted him to underestimate me. Let him think I was licking my wounds while I was really sharpening my claws. The next morning, I went back to the house while Daniel was at work. I didn't go to fight or to cry. I went for the practical things: birth certificates, financial records, Ella's school documents. But when I opened his office drawer, I saw something that stopped me cold. A bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. It wasn't in his name or mine. It was under a new LLC, Clark and Whitmore Consulting. That's when I realized the cheating wasn't the worst betrayal. It was just the start. And the silence I'd been living in? It was about to get very loud. I didn't sleep much that night. The image of that fake company name, Clark and Whitmore Consulting, kept replaying in my head like a song I didn't ask to hear. The next morning, I woke up before Ella, made coffee, and sat at Hannah's kitchen table with the bank statement in front of me. It was dated only 2 weeks before the night he yelled at me to get out. The numbers didn't make sense. Large transfers, round amounts, even payments labeled as consulting fees. Daniel was an architect, not a consultant. There was no reason he should be wiring $5,000 at a time to a company that didn't exist 6 months ago. Unless, of course, it did exist for him and Madison. When Hannah came downstairs, I showed her the document. She didn't even blink. "He's moving money," she said. "He probably set up a shell company with her name on it. That's how they hide assets before divorce." I felt my throat tighten. "But I haven't even filed for divorce." She took a sip of her coffee. "Doesn't matter. He's preparing for it. Men like that always assume you'll forgive them until the day you don't. And when that day comes, they want to make sure you walk away broke." I wanted to believe Daniel wasn't that kind of man. But the evidence was right there in black and white. The same man who once promised me transparency and teamwork had apparently rebranded himself as a one-man Ponzi scheme. I spent the next 2 hours combing through every file in that office. Tax forms, invoices, letters, each one told the same story. He was building a financial wall I wasn't supposed to see. Then I found it. A receipt from the Ocean View Hotel in Charleston, dated the same weekend he told me he was on a business trip. The receipt included champagne for 2 and breakfast service for 1 room, under Clark and Whitmore Consulting. I didn't need a detective. I had Amex. When I showed Hannah, she muttered, "He's either the dumbest man alive or thinks you're blind." I almost laughed. Almost. By afternoon, she'd already made a few calls to her paralegal, who specialized in financial misconduct. "Grace," she said, "you might have more leverage than you think. If he's been using marital funds to finance this little side company, that's not just betrayal, it's fraud." Fraud. That word felt heavier than affair. Affairs end. Fraud lingers. While Ella was at school, I drove to Daniel's firm, not to confront him, but to observe. It's strange how invisible you become when people think you've been discarded. No one even stopped me as I walked into the lobby. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. "Hi, Mrs. Whitmore. I mean, Miss..." "Grace is fine," I said. My voice came out calm, steadier than I felt. Madison walked by right then, laughing with one of the junior partners. She wore Daniel's jacket, recognizable by the small tear on the sleeve I'd sewn last year. She didn't even glance my way. Maybe she didn't expect to see the woman she'd replaced standing under the same roof. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the top floor, then changed my mind and got out. There was nothing left to see there. His world was already built on lies, and I wasn't about to walk through it looking for proof. The real evidence was already sitting in my bag. That evening, I went to pick up Ella. She was holding a drawing she'd made at school, our house, the 3 of us smiling. "Daddy said he'll come home soon," she said cheerfully. I forced a smile. "We'll see, sweetheart." When she went to bed, I sat by the window, looking out over the quiet Savannah streets. The city lights shimmered off the river, calm and indifferent, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I thought about the years I'd spent budgeting, saving, making sacrifices so Daniel could grow his firm. The missed vacations, the smaller Christmases, the way I'd defended him when people whispered about his temper. All that loyalty, and he turned it into a line item under consulting expenses. Around midnight, Hannah texted, Found something. Clark and Whitmore was registered under Madison's maiden name. You've got him, Grace. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than sadness. It wasn't joy, it was focus. Like a switch flipping inside me. He wanted freedom? Fine. But I wasn't going to give him the luxury of a clean escape. The next morning, I went to the school early to drop Ella off. I hugged her a little longer than usual. Then I drove to the courthouse downtown and met Hannah in the parking lot. She handed me a folder labeled Spousal Financial Misconduct. Once we file this, she said, everything changes. I opened the folder and stared at the form. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the moment I stopped being a victim and started being a witness. I didn't sign it yet. I wanted Daniel to see me calm, collected, and absolutely unshaken. He thought he could hide money and rewrite the story of our marriage. But stories like his always collapse under their own lies. That afternoon, I stopped by the house one last time to pick up Ella's favorite stuffed bear. His car was in the driveway, but I didn't care. I walked in through the side door, grabbed what I needed, and left without a word. As I closed the door behind me, I noticed his office light was still on, and the bank statement I'd taken a photo of was gone. So he knew I knew. Good. The morning after I found out Daniel knew I had the bank statement, I woke up feeling different, not broken focused. It was like my brain had finally switched from heartbreak to problem-solving mode. Pain had burned off, and what was left was precision. I made breakfast for Ella, packed her lunch, and kissed her forehead before school. The moment she closed the car door, my mind shifted gears. No more reacting. From that point forward, everything I did would be deliberate. Hannah met me at her office, holding 2 coffees and a folder thick enough to make a point. You ready to play quiet hardball? She asked. Define quiet, I said. She grinned. The kind that ruins a man without raising your voice. Inside the folder were financial printouts, asset maps, and emails connecting Daniel's consulting firm to Madison's name. Each piece of paper was a thread, and together they formed a noose he didn't even know he'd tied. What's the goal? I asked. To prove he diverted marital assets, Hannah said, pointing to the timeline she'd drawn in red pen. If he used your joint funds for personal gain or to support another person, it's misconduct. We build that case quietly, and when the investigation hits, it'll look like a storm came out of nowhere. I stared at the papers. I'm not trying to ruin him, Hannah. I just want what's fair. She tilted her head. Grace, fair went out the window when he told you to get out. You don't have to destroy him. You just have to make sure he destroys himself with his own actions. That afternoon, we set up a private consultation with a forensic accountant, someone who could trace Daniel's money trail without tipping him off. His name was Thomas Jenkins, a calm, middle-aged man who looked like he'd seen every financial sin imaginable. He asked me for statements, passwords, and any documents I had access to. I handed over a USB drive Hannah helped me compile. Jenkins plugged it in, looked through the files, and said, You've got him. He's moving money through shell accounts, possibly to avoid tax reporting. If you want to play this smart, let me flag it quietly to the IRS. Will that cause him trouble? I asked. He smiled slightly. Grace, he caused himself trouble. You're just not cleaning up after him anymore. Endowed. Leaving his office, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was a direction. That night, I took Ella for ice cream. She told me she missed home. I told her home isn't just a house, it's where people tell the truth. She looked at me and said, Then our home's with you. Kids say things like that so simply, like they're not holding the weight of the world with every word. Later, while tucking her in, I noticed she'd drawn another picture. This time, it was just the 2 of us, standing in front of a small house with flowers. No Daniel. I kissed her goodnight and stared at that drawing longer than I should have. The next morning, Hannah called. You up for something bold? I've had my coffee, I said. Try me. There's a company gala next week. Madison's attending as Daniel's +1. I can get you an invitation. I almost laughed. You're joking. Nope. You don't have to cause a scene. Just show up. Smile. Make him sweat. Let him see you standing tall, not broken. I thought about it all day. The idea wasn't to humiliate him, It was to remind him I existed. He'd built this illusion where he was the hero starting fresh, and I was the problem left behind. Showing up quietly would be my way of rewriting that script. The day of the gala, I wore a navy dress. Hannah picked out simple, elegant, nothing loud. I walked into the ballroom like I was there for business, not closure. The chandeliers sparkled, the waiters floated around with champagne, and the whispers started almost immediately. Daniel froze when he saw me. Madison's smile tightened. He looked like a man who'd just seen a ghost with perfect posture. "Grace," he said finally, trying to sound calm. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. "That makes two of us." Madison's eyes darted around the room, probably calculating exits. Daniel leaned in. "You shouldn't be here. People might see the truth?" I cut in. "Good. Maybe they'll stop believing your version." I walked away before he could respond, leaving him mid-sentence. Hannah watched from across the room, hiding a grin behind her glass. I didn't need to make a scene. The silence around me was doing the job perfectly. People could sense tension without words. You can't fake calm when your world's about to collapse. Before leaving, I placed a folded piece of paper on Daniel's table. Nothing dramatic, just a short note. "Transparency, remember? You taught me that. Grace." He read it, his face pale. Outside the hotel, the air was cool and clean. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, realizing how different silence feels when it's yours. The next day, Hannah called. "He's panicking. Jenkins said the IRS flagged his company for review this morning." "Already?" "Yep. Quiet storms move fast. And..." I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just poured myself another coffee and said, "Good. Now let's keep it that way." Because revenge isn't about shouting or breaking things, it's about precision. And the first step in precision is patience. The following week, Savannah felt smaller. Everywhere I went, it was as if someone already knew something about me. The stares at the grocery store had turned from curious to pitying. Pity is worse than gossip. It's the look people give you when they've decided you lost. I was determined to make sure that wasn't true. That Friday, Hannah called again. "There's a development," she said, her tone sharp. "Daniel's firm is hosting an industry mixer tonight at the Riverfront Hotel. Madison will be there. So will the press." I didn't even hesitate. "Send me the address." "How?" When I got there, the lobby was packed with the kind of people who smiled with their teeth but not their eyes. Everyone was holding a drink, pretending to care about market trends and community partnerships. It was the same circle Daniel and I had moved in for years. Now I was the ghost in the room. He saw me the moment I stepped in. His expression flickered shock, guilt, then that fake calm men put on when they're cornered in public. Madison stood beside him in a red dress that could have paid half of Ella's school tuition. She held his arm like a prize. I didn't walk toward them. I let him come to me. He always liked control. I wanted him to think he still had some. "Grace," he said, trying to sound casual. "I didn't expect you here." I smiled. "You never do." He looked around nervously. "We shouldn't make a scene." "Don't worry," I said. "That's never been my style." Madison leaned in, pretending sweetness. "It's good to see you, Grace. You look better." That "better" carried the weight of every backhanded comment women like her are trained to deliver. I didn't take the bait. "Thank you, Madison," I said calmly. "I can see Daniel's been consistent with his taste." She blinked. It took her a full 3 seconds to realize it wasn't a compliment. Daniel pulled her aside and whispered something, probably trying to manage damage. That's what he did best, manage optics, not consequences. I walked toward the bar, grabbed a glass of sparkling water, and stood where everyone could see me. I didn't need to talk. Just being there calm, elegant, unbothered, was enough to shift the energy. People began whispering, connecting dots. I could almost hear the mental math. Wife, affair, new girlfriend, IRS audit. Hannah texted me from across the room. "He looks like he swallowed a lemon." I replied, "Perfect. That's his flavor." One of Daniel's partners, Rick, approached me quietly. "Grace," he said, lowering his voice. "I had no idea about all this. We're sorry for what you're going through." I tilted my head. Rick, you don't have to be sorry for him. He's doing great, isn't he? New company, new face, same fraud? His eyes widened. Fraud? I smiled and sipped my drink. Oh, didn't you know? Rick walked away fast. I didn't lie. I just let the truth travel without supervision. Across the room, I caught Madison whispering frantically into Daniel's ear. His jaw tightened. He was unraveling publicly, politely, but definitely unraveling. An older investor came over to shake my hand. Mrs. Whitmore, he said warmly, I've been hearing about your volunteer work at the Literacy Center. You've handled yourself with grace through everything. Funny how people always use that word when they mean, I can't believe you didn't lose it. Thank you, I said. Sometimes silence says more than shouting. He nodded. Well, whatever's going on, the truth has a way of surfacing. That sentence sat with me. Because he was right, and it already was. Half an hour later, the room buzzed with low murmurs. Daniel's phone rang twice. He ignored it. On the third call, he stepped outside. Madison followed, her heels clicking like accusations. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked past the glass doors to the balcony, far enough to stay unnoticed. He was pacing, phone pressed to his ear. I told you not to contact me at work, he hissed. I don't care what they found, handle it. There it was, the panic. Madison's face drained of color. She asked, What happened? He muttered, IRS audit. Someone tipped them off. Her lips parted. Grace. Don't be ridiculous, he snapped. She's not smart enough. That's when I opened the door. Finish that sentence. He froze. Madison turned away, embarrassed, but I wasn't looking at her. I looked straight at him, the man who once swore I was his partner in everything. Smart enough for what, Daniel? I asked softly. He had no words. Just that blank look men get when they realize the person they underestimated is the one holding the match. I stepped closer. You said you wanted your own life. Congratulations, you're about to live it under investigation. He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait to hear whatever lie he was building. I turned, walked back into the ballroom, and handed my glass to a waiter with a polite smile. Thank you. I'm done. The air felt lighter when I stepped outside the hotel. The night was warm, the city lights dancing across the river. I sat in my car for a long minute, breathing, my hands steady on the steering wheel. For the first time since, he'd yelled, Get out! I felt something like peace thin, fragile, but real. That peace wasn't forgiveness. It was understanding. I didn't need to destroy him. I just had to stop saving him. When I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Daniel and Madison through the glass doors, him shouting, her crying, two people who'd mistaken chaos for freedom. I didn't smile. I just turned the key and drove home, the sound of the engine replacing every word I didn't need to say. When you've watched someone lie to your face long enough, you eventually stop arguing, you start documenting. That's what I told myself the day I decided to write the letter. Daniel had spent weeks pretending everything was fine. He'd call about Ella's schedule, just to test how much I knew. He'd send polite texts, careful with every word, as if decency could erase deceit. But the truth had already moved out with me. That Friday afternoon, I went back to the house while he was at work. The place felt like a museum of a life I no longer recognized. His shoes lined up perfectly by the door. His mug still said, World's Best Dad. My wedding ring left in the drawer looked smaller than I remembered. I wasn't there for sentiment. I came for closure. The first thing I did was open his office drawer. The folder labeled Clark and Whitmore was gone. Of course it was. But his arrogance left breadcrumbs. I found another document under household expenses. Inside were invoices addressed to the same shell company, this time with Madison's name on the vendor line. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. That's when I decided the letter wasn't going to be about pain, it was going to be about precision. I sat at his desk, opened a blank page, and started writing in my neatest, calmest handwriting. Daniel, you once told me honesty was the foundation of everything we built. I believed you. Turns out, foundations crack when only one person keeps reinforcing them. You wanted freedom, so I'm giving it to you, the kind that comes with consequences. You called it love. I call it evidence. I folded it once, slid it into an envelope, and placed it right in the middle of his desk between his computer and the framed photo of Ella from her 5th birthday. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't take anything I hadn't earned. I just left the truth where he couldn't ignore it. Before leaving, I took one last look at our family picture on the wall. Not because I missed him, but because I wanted to remember the version of me who believed words like forever meant something. That night, Hannah called. "You actually left it?" "Right on his desk." "What did you write?" "Nothing I'll regret." She laughed softly. "You're scarier when you're calm." The next morning, my phone started buzzing nonstop. First a call from Daniel ignored. Then a string of messages. "What is this? You can't just threaten me." "Well, do you even understand what you've done?" He was unraveling, and he didn't even know how little I'd done yet. The IRS had already launched their inquiry thanks to Jenkins, and his partners were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. By noon, he sent one more text. "You'll regret this." I stared at the screen and smiled. "No," I whispered. "You will." That afternoon, Hannah called again. "He's in damage control mode. His firm just put out a memo about temporary restructuring. Translation: everyone knows." "Good," I said. "Let him live the life he wanted without me cleaning up after him." Around 5, I picked up Ella from school. She asked if we could drive by the old house. I didn't want to, but I did. From the street, I saw Daniel standing in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, face pale and drawn. Madison was beside him, arms crossed, looking like someone who'd bet on the wrong man. Ella waved. He froze. She didn't notice his hesitation, but I did. When we pulled away, she asked, "Mom, is Daddy okay?" I kept my eyes on the road. "He's learning something important." That evening, I checked my email. There it was, an alert from Jenkins. The IRS had officially opened a case file. He wrote, "Expect formal correspondence soon. Keep calm and document everything." I forwarded it to Hannah with one line, "Freedom comes with paperwork." That night, after Ella fell asleep, I opened my journal, the same one I'd used to track his finances. Instead of numbers, I wrote feelings for the first time in weeks. Not sentimental ones, just facts about how clarity feels. Clarity isn't peace. It's the silence before peace shows up. Then, I got another text from Daniel. Short this time. "You win." I didn't reply. Winning was never the goal. Justice was. A few days later, I stopped by his office to drop off Ella's art project. His secretary looked nervous. "He's in a meeting," she said. "I'm not here for him," I replied. "Just this." I left the drawing on her desk, a picture of Ella and me holding hands under a big sun, labeled "Me and Mom." Walking out of that building, I felt something shift. Not triumph, not revenge. Just weight leaving my shoulders. When I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. A voicemail. I hit play. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Agent Redding from the IRS field office. We'd like to schedule a time to discuss your documentation. Please call us back." I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of traffic around me. Then I smiled, small, quiet, real. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was earned. The first sign that Daniel's life was starting to collapse didn't come from him. It came from his silence. No texts, no calls, no fake attempts to co-parent peacefully. Just quiet. The kind that means someone's too busy trying to put out fires they started themselves. It had been 5 days since I left the letter on his desk. I was making breakfast when Hannah called. Her voice had that sharp, satisfied tone only lawyers get when justice finally starts to move. "Grace, you might want to sit down for this." I laughed. "That good?" "Oh, better." The IRS contacted his firm. They froze his accounts pending review. Clark and Whitmore is officially under investigation for tax evasion and misappropriation of marital assets. For a second, I didn't speak. I just looked out the kitchen window, watching Ella chase the neighbor's cat across the yard, her laughter cutting through the morning air. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the one running. "Is he being charged?" I asked. "Not yet," Hannah said. "But once they trace the money, and they will, it's over. They'll find every transfer he made, every fake invoice, and every payment tied to that woman." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Good. I don't want to ruin him, Hannah. I just want the truth to stand taller than his lies. You've already done that, she said. Later that afternoon, I got an email from Jenkins, the forensic accountant. Attached were screenshots and summaries, wire transfers, expense reports, and an internal memo where Daniel approved payments labeled as consulting fees that went straight into Madison's personal account. It was all there, neat and damning. The irony was almost poetic. He'd built a fake company to hide his affair, and now that same company was going to take him down. By evening, the story had already started to ripple through Savannah's business circles. His partners held an emergency meeting. Madison deleted her social media accounts. And Daniel tried to call me. I let it ring, twice, then a third time. Finally, I answered. What do you want, Daniel? He sounded exhausted, like someone who'd been pretending everything was fine until the pretense cracked. Grace, we need to talk. No, I said calmly. You need to listen. He started rambling about misunderstandings, audits, business rivals trying to frame him. The usual script men like him pull out when the walls start closing in. You did this, he said finally. You went too far. I almost laughed. You're right, I went too far. I married you, believed you, defended you, and built a life with you. That was too far. He was silent for a beat. You don't know what it's like to have everyone watching you fail. Actually, I said, I do. The difference is I didn't deserve it. Then I hung up. No screaming, no closure speech, just a click. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. That night, Hannah came over with takeout. She looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. He's officially under federal review, she said. And get this, his firm is trying to distance themselves. They're claiming they had no idea. Which means they'll feed him to the wolves, I said. She grinned. Exactly. It's corporate survival. They'll fire him to save themselves. I nodded, then asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind. Do you think he'll ever realize this isn't revenge? That it's just consequence? Maybe someday, she said. But by then, it won't matter. The next morning, Ella's school had a small open house. Parents gathered in the classroom, drinking coffee from paper cups, and pretending not to compete over who had the most perfect child. I was halfway through a conversation with another mom when I noticed the looks. That awkward sympathy again mixed with curiosity. Someone whispered, Isn't that the woman whose husband's under investigation? I smiled politely and said, Yes, and he earned every minute of it. That shut them up faster than caffeine. By afternoon, I got another email, this one from an unknown sender. It was a forwarded message originally sent from Daniel's office account. Subject line, Immediate termination, breach of ethics. The email was short and brutal. Effective immediately, Mr. Whitmore's partnership with the firm is dissolved. A formal statement will follow. I read it twice, then once more for good measure. Then I closed my laptop and went outside. The sky was gray, heavy with rain. I sat on the porch and listened to the first drops hit the railing. It felt like the world was finally exhaling with me. When the rain picked up, I stayed there, soaked and smiling. Not because I was happy he'd fallen, but because I wasn't carrying the weight anymore. By evening, another call came in. This time, it wasn't Daniel, it was Madison. Grace, she said quietly, I know you hate me, but you should know I didn't know he was married when it started. I almost pitied her. Almost. You didn't check? I asked. She hesitated. He said you were separated. I sighed. Then let this be your lesson. When a man says that, he's usually lying to both of you. She started crying. I didn't comfort her. Some lessons don't need sympathy. They need silence. When I hung up, the house was quiet again. Ella was asleep. The rain had stopped. I looked around at the small, borrowed living room that had become our safe space and realized something peace doesn't announce itself. It just replaces the noise when you finally stop chasing explanations. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because justice was done, but because I finally believed I deserved it. Courtrooms don't look like they do in movies. They're smaller, colder, and smell faintly of old paper and coffee. The morning of the hearing, I sat beside Hannah at the petitioner's table, my palms resting flat on the polished wood. Across from me sat Daniel, same navy suit, same posture, same fake calm that once fooled investors and friends alike. The only difference now was that he looked tired. Not sad, just tired. Like a man who'd finally met his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority without effort. She didn't need to raise her tone. Everyone quieted as soon as she looked up. Hannah whispered, "Judge McCall doesn't like drama. Stay calm, answer clearly, and let his attorney dig his own hole." I nodded. I'd been practicing calm for months. It had become my superpower. Daniel's lawyer started with the usual performance. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets how events unfolded. This marriage simply fell apart, miscommunication, emotional distance, mutual mistakes." Mutual mistakes. That phrase landed like a slap. Hannah stood. "Your Honor, we're not here to debate emotions. We're here to address financial misconduct. Specifically, Mr. Whitmore's deliberate transfer of marital funds into an undisclosed company for personal gain." She handed the judge a binder meticulously organized evidence Jenkins had helped compile. Bank statements, LLC registration documents, payment records, the truth in spreadsheet form. Daniel avoided my eyes. He fiddled with a pen, pretending to read something important on the table. Judge McCall flipped through the binder, brow furrowed. "Mr. Whitmore, these are substantial amounts. Are you denying these transfers?" His lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, those were legitimate business expenses." McCall cut him off. "Paid to a company registered under your client's mistress's name?" The room went still. Even the court reporter paused mid-keystroke. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. "That wasn't her company. It was a joint project." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "A project funded with your wife's joint earnings?" He opened his mouth, but the judge lifted a hand. "Mr. Whitmore, I'd advise you to stop talking." It was one of those rare moments where silence did more damage than any accusation. When it was my turn to speak, Hannah asked me to describe the events leading up to the investigation. I kept my voice steady. No theatrics, no tears. "I found documents showing transfers to a shell company. When I asked him about it, he told me to get out. So I did. Then I did what he didn't expect. I paid attention." The judge nodded slowly. "And you were the one who contacted the IRS?" "I provided documentation," I said. "They did the rest." Daniel shot me a glare, the kind that used to make me apologize for things I hadn't done. It didn't work anymore. By midday, his lawyer's confidence had wilted. The defense shifted from denial to negotiation, from "it never happened" to "it wasn't intentional." The judge wasn't buying it. "Here's what I see," she said, closing the file. "A man who betrayed his wife, his firm, and federal tax law, all while convincing himself he was too clever to get caught." Hannah leaned over and whispered, "That's the sound of your victory speech being written for you." When the ruling came, it was quiet but final. I was granted primary custody of Ella, 70% of the marital assets, and ownership of the house. Daniel was ordered to pay restitution for the funds he misused. The gavel hit the block. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder. Afterward, in the hallway, Daniel approached me. For the first time in months, his voice cracked. "Grace, can we talk? Just us?" I almost said no, but something in his tone stopped me. I followed him to a corner by the window. He looked out over the courthouse steps, hands in his pockets like a man rehearsing humility. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he said. "I just wanted to feel like myself again." I studied his face. "And destroying our family helped with that?" He shook his head. "You were always better at everything, planning, saving, holding things together." I felt small. For a moment, I almost saw the man I used to love, the one who built dreams with me, instead of spreadsheets of lies. But then I remembered the night he screamed, "Get out!" That memory had edges sharp enough to keep me grounded. "Daniel," I said quietly, "you didn't feel small because of me. You felt small because of the choices you made." He looked at me then, really looked, maybe realizing that the woman standing in front of him wasn't the same one he'd shouted down months ago. "Grace," he said softly, "I don't know how to fix this." I met his eyes. "Good. Because it's not yours to fix anymore." I clay. I turned and walked away before he could say another word. Outside, Hannah was waiting on the courthouse steps, sunglasses on, arms crossed, smiling like a cat who'd just finished breakfast. "Well?" she asked. "It's over," I said. She smirked. "No, Grace. It's balanced." We walked to the car without looking back. Behind us, Daniel stood in the doorway, small against the tall stone columns, watching the life he'd built fall apart in real time. The sky was bright, almost too bright, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like a cruel joke. It felt like something close to freedom, the kind you earn, not the kind you're given. 2 weeks after the court hearing, the final papers arrived in a thick envelope. It wasn't the kind of delivery you celebrate, but I still poured myself a glass of wine before opening it. The divorce was official. My name was restored to Grace Whitmore, single mother, teacher, taxpayer, and survivor of one man's self-inflicted downfall. The house was now legally mine, though I didn't rush to move back. It wasn't the walls that haunted me, it was the echo of his voice shouting, "Get out!" I'd cleaned the place, painted over the stains, but there are some sounds you can't scrub away. That morning, while Ella colored at the kitchen table, I caught a news segment on the local channel. Former architect under federal investigation for tax misconduct. Daniel's face flashed across the screen, older somehow, his confident grin replaced by something hollow. The reporter mentioned that his firm had distanced itself completely, and Madison had resigned. They called it personal matters. I called it karma, with impeccable timing. Hannah texted me seconds later. "You see it? Guess who just became Savannah's most infamous cautionary tale?" I typed back. He wanted to live his own life. Now he's living it on the 6 o'clock news. It wasn't victory, I felt it was closure. A quiet, matter-of-fact kind of satisfaction that didn't need celebration. That afternoon, I took Ella to her piano lesson. On the way home, we stopped for groceries. I was scanning the cereal aisle when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Grace." I turned. Daniel stood there, unshaven, wearing the kind of expression you see in people who've been through fire and didn't come out clean. He held a small basket milk, bread, coffee. The basics. He looked thinner, and not in a healthy way. "You look different," he said awkwardly. "I sleep," I said. "That helps." He gave a weak smile. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I talked to you. For the money. For Madison. For all of it. I didn't interrupt. Letting him speak was the final act of power. He took a shaky breath. "They froze everything. My accounts, my projects, Madison's gone, my reputation's gone. I thought freedom meant starting over, but it feels more like standing in an empty room. Freedom has an echo," I said. "It sounds different when no one's left to listen." He nodded slowly, looking down at the floor tiles. "You didn't deserve any of it. You were always there. I just wanted more," I finished. "You already told me that. You just didn't realize more doesn't mean better." For a second, neither of us spoke. The hum of the store filled the space where love used to be. He glanced at Ella, who was looking at snacks a few aisles down. "She's grown," he said quietly. "She had to." He swallowed. "Can I call her sometime?" "You can call your lawyer," I said evenly. "Custody arrangements are through the court now." His face fell, but I didn't flinch. It wasn't cruelty, it was boundary. There's a difference. He sighed and tried to smile again, that old salesman charm flickering back to life for a moment. "You always were stronger than me." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending weakness was love." When I walked away, I didn't look back. Some stories don't need rewrites, they just need endings that finally stay ended. Later that night, a letter arrived in the mail. Not from the court this time, but from Daniel. Handwritten, shaky, like someone who hadn't held a pen in a while. "Grace? I used to think love was something you earned. Now I know it's something you protect. You protected it until I burned it down. I see now that freedom isn't the same as happiness, and pride isn't strength. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just needed you to know I finally understand the cost. A win?" I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a box, the same one that held my old wedding ring, a few family photos, and the letter I left on his desk months ago. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just looked at those two letters, side by side, the beginning of my freedom and the end of his, and thought, balance restored. That weekend, Ella and I visited the farmer's market. The sun was out, and the air smelled like oranges and roasted coffee. She ran ahead to the flower stall, holding up a sunflower almost as tall as she was. "Mom, this one's happy," she said. I smiled. "That's because it's facing the light." We spent the morning walking through the market, talking about school projects, her favorite books, and her new piano song. Nothing about the past, just life moving forward, the way it's supposed to. When we got home, I placed the sunflower on the dining table. The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or headlines. It slips in when you finally stop fighting to be heard and start listening to yourself again. That night, after Ella went to bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and thought about the journey that got me here. I realized something that made me smile. Daniel was right about one thing. He told me to get out and let him live his own life. And I did. The only difference was that I learned to live mine better. Mornings felt different now. The alarm still rang at 6, but it wasn't a sound that startled me awake anymore. It was just the beginning of another quiet, steady day. I'd make coffee, pack Ella's lunch, and watch the sunrise through the kitchen window. For the first time in years, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt earned. After the divorce, I went back to teaching full-time at Savannah High. My classroom was small, the desks wobbled, and the heating never worked right, but it was mine. The kids were loud and unpredictable, but at least they were honest. Teenagers don't pretend. If they think something's unfair, they say it. Maybe that's why I liked being around them. After living with someone who built his life on pretending, their blunt honesty felt refreshing. During lunch breaks, I'd sit in the staff lounge with my colleagues, listening to their everyday complaints, grading fatigue, broken copiers, the mystery of who kept stealing yogurt from the communal fridge. Ordinary problems, beautifully ordinary. One afternoon, as I was organizing essays, Hannah stopped by my classroom. She leaned against the doorframe, her lawyer's blazer swapped for a denim jacket. "You know," she said, "most people would have taken a vacation after a year like yours." "Oh." I smiled. Most people didn't have to rebuild an entire life from a filing cabinet. She laughed, but her eyes softened. "You've done more than rebuild, you've reset." I thought about that after she left. Reset, that was exactly it. My life wasn't patched together from what Daniel broke. It was rebuilt from what he couldn't touch. My patience, my dignity, my love for my daughter. That evening, I picked Ella up from her piano recital. She'd played her piece flawlessly, even bowed like a pro. As we walked to the car, she said, "Mom, are you happy?" It caught me off guard. I looked at her, this small, bright soul who'd survived the storm with me. "Yeah, baby," I said. "I really am." She grinned. "Then I am too." Driving home, the sky was a watercolor blend of orange and pink, and for once, it didn't feel like a metaphor. It was just beautiful, no deeper meaning, no emotional weight. Just beauty existing for its own sake. When we got home, I found a letter in the mailbox with a return address I recognized immediately. Daniel. I brought it inside, set it on the counter, and made dinner before opening it. I wasn't afraid of what it said. I just wasn't in a rush. After dinner, when Ella went to her room, I finally unfolded it. "Grace, I know you don't owe me a reply, but I wanted to thank you for what you didn't do. You could have humiliated me, taken more, made this worse. You didn't. I've lost everything, but what hurts most is knowing you didn't have to destroy me. I did that myself. I hope you and Ella are okay. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her I'm sorry. Daniel." I read it twice. Not because I missed him, but because I wanted to make sure I'd read every word of accountability. Then I placed the letter next to the first one I'd written, the one that started it all, and tucked them both away. The beginning and the end, resting in the same box. Some people think forgiveness is about giving someone another chance. I learned it's about giving yourself one. You don't forgive to fix them, you forgive to stop carrying the parts of them that broke you. That weekend, Ella and I went to the beach. The ocean was calm, the wind soft. She ran ahead, letting the waves chase her feet. I sat on the sand, shoes off, feeling the cold water touch my toes. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed in that last year. The wife who begged for honesty, the woman who stayed quiet, the mother who fought back, the survivor who didn't crumble. Each one had carried me here to this quiet, wide-open place where I finally felt whole again. A couple nearby asked me to take a picture of them. The woman smiled and said, "You have the calmest energy. You look like someone who's been through hell and decided to redecorate it." I laughed. "That's not far off." When Ella came running back with seashells in her hands, she said, "Mom, can we build something?" "Sure," I said. "What do you want to build?" "A house," she said. "But not like the old one. This one's by the ocean." We built it together. Sand walls, seashell windows, a driftwood door. The tide took it away within minutes, but that didn't matter. It wasn't meant to last. It was meant to exist for a moment of joy. Later that evening, we stopped for ice cream on the way home. The cashier, a young guy with too much energy, asked, "Good day?" I smiled. "You have no idea." When we got home, Ella fell asleep on the couch. I covered her with a blanket and sat beside her, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. That sound, the small rhythm of peace, was all I needed to know I'd done the right thing. As the night grew quiet, I walked to my desk, opened my journal, and wrote one last entry. He wanted freedom, so did I. The difference is I didn't have to break anyone to find it. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the silence wrap around me like something finally safe. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't letting them back in. It's letting yourself go free. If you enjoy true cheating stories, revenge stories, and tales of husband betrayal where justice comes quietly, but completely subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. You never know, your story of survival might be the one that helps someone else find their own peace.